لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا المرسلين وآله وسلم. وبعد، فقال المؤلف الإمام الغزالي رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم. So if you remember, inshallah, we are on the chapter of the four hindrances. So after you go through the stage of knowledge, then you go through the stage of tawbah, repentance, then you go through the stage of the four obstacles, the nafs, the dunya, the shaitan, and the creation. Then you come to the stage of the four hindrances that we have to get to, and they're all linked towards tawakkul, trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not being anxious about your provision, about your life and all of these things. To leave things in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the key to all of these hindrances, because these can then distract us from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I told you the example of a certain brother, and this is a typical story for many as well, who kept calling me. He wanted to go out to study knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is one of the greatest acts of ibadah that you can do, is to study this deen, study the deen. It is one of the highest acts of ibadah that you can do, and he wanted to sacrifice some time, some years to doing this. But every time he was trying to make up his mind, he kept thinking, maybe I should wait until I finish certain thing, or maybe I should wait till I've sort of secured certain things, like like my house, or wait till my child is a bit older, or etc, etc. So then he kept putting it off and never went to do the thing. So that's how an example of how what he had to do was say, I trust in Allah for my future in this case, and just head off to do the thing that he had to do.
Try it, Qasim, see if you can find it.
Probably one of those.
It's behind me.
Jazakallah khair.
We're talking about the qada, the first thing, and then we haven't finished the first paragraph about the al-arad al-thalith, al-qada. أحدهما للتفرغ للعبادة. We did the first couple of lines, but we haven't finished the whole paragraph.
الأرض الأول did you say, or الثالث القضاء ووجوده أنواعه.
Yeah.
Okay.
أحدهما.
Yeah.
Then we started with it, but we haven't finished the first.
Okay. So the third hindrance is qada al-qada. Remember we said last time, what is qada? When a judge gives a qada, he gives a decision. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he gives his decision, is called qada, and there's nothing that can ever change the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's linked to qadar. Often people say al-qadar wal-qada, don't they? Al-qadar is similar, but qadar is more, gives the meaning of measuring something out. Qadara literally means to measure something out. If I measure something, it's called taqdeer. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala measures everything. Our rizq is measured. Our lifespan is measured. Everything is come in measure. So that's, qadar. And qada is when Allah has made a decision. It's never changed. Now, of course, then someone might say, then what's the point of making dua? But then the Prophet ﷺ said that the dua can change the qadr. The dua can change what is written. And the meaning of that, I think we've explained before, but that was just to explain to people that, of course, there is a benefit to make dua. But if Allah accepts your dua, that was already written as well in a higher place, that this person would make dua and then this thing would be changed. This affliction or whatever that was thinking. وإنما كفايته في الرضا به فعليك أن ترضى بقضاء الله عز وجل وذلك لأمرين أحدهما تفرغ للعبادة لأنك إذا لم ترضى بقضاء الله عز وجل فتكون مهموما مشغول القلب أبدا بأنه لما كان كذا وكذا ولماذا لا يكون كذا وكذا. This is in order to free ourselves for worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is very important that we have satisfaction with the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to be able to say whatever has happened was the qadar of Allah, and whatever is going to happen is qadar of Allah. That will then make us not have anxieties about the future and depression about the past. There were people, I remember when the big earthquake happened in Pakistan a few years ago, there was BBC reporters, I was listening to Radio 5 once, and they had gone to Pakistan, to Kashmir, and this is, the devastation, so many people were killed and everything. But the thing that they found surprising was that people were so accepting of the situation. They thought the people would be so distressed and, crying and all of this thing. The reporter, I remember him saying about how he just was surprised at the way people were so accepting of what had happened. Because people were saying it was Allah's will, this thing happened. So that's generally a Muslim's viewpoint, Muslim's outlook. So even you see ordinary Muslims have that type of reaction. So we have to, especially for those who are on the spiritual path, have to be more so accepting of the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us in our lives for these things. There will be things that will happen where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us to see if we really do have, if we are satisfied with whatever He decreed. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Problem with having a children's school when they have their lunch and let's see. فإذا اشتغل القلب بشيء من هذه الهموم كيف يتفرغ للعبادة إذ ليس لك إلا قلب واحد وقد ملأته من الهموم بما كان وما يكون من أمر الدنيا فأي موضع يكون فيه لذكر العبادة وفكر الآخرة. So it says, we only have one heart in our bodies. So if our heart is full of worries about what is going to happen or what has happened, then how will our heart have the freedom to focus on worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thinking about the akhirah when it's so preoccupied with the affairs of the dunya? ولقد صدق شقيقنا البلخي رحمه الله في قوله إن حسرة الأمور الماضية وتدبير الآتية قد ذهبت ببركة ساعتك هذه. So as Shaykh al-Balkhi rahimahullah said, your sadness about the things that have passed and your anxiety about the things that are going to come have taken away the barakah of your time, of your present. So this is something I've mentioned often in the classes about how the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are people of the present. They're not people of the past or the future. Because the past is something that Allah decreed and they're satisfied with whatever Allah decreed. And the future is something that Allah will reveal. So they're satisfied with whatever Allah will reveal. So they're able to then use the present to the maximum. Whereas a person who is depressed about the past and anxious about the future, his present is lost. He's not able to use the present because of those emotions that he's going through. الثاني من الأمرين خطر ما في السخط من غضب الله تعالى. ولقد روينا في الأخبار أن نبيا من الأنبياء شكى بعض ما ناله من المكروه إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى. The second reason why we should be satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is because if we're not satisfied, that means that we've got sakhat, which means we're unhappy or angry at the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is actually a very dangerous state to be in. To be angry with what Allah has decreed or dissatisfied with what Allah has decreed is a very dangerous state to be in. So he mentioned a story that there was once a prophet who once complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to some affliction that had occurred to him. He complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he was a prophet. فأوحى الله تعالى إليه أتشكوني ولست بأهل ذم ولا شكوى هكذا بدا شأنك في علم الغيب فلما تسخط قضائي عليك. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimanded him, saying, why are you complaining? You're not someone who's in a position to complain about what has happened. You're not in a position to complain. This is something that we often should try to bear in mind as well. As human beings, we're in such a narrow view of things. We don't see the reality of things. So we're not in a position to challenge why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed so and so or so and so. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimanded him in this way. He said, your knowledge of the unseen, you don't have knowledge of the unseen. So why are you then complaining about my decree? أتريد أن أغير الدنيا لأجلك? Do you think, Allah says to the Prophet, do you think I should change things because of you? Do you think you know better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? أو أبدل اللوح المحفوظ بسببك? You think I should change the lawh al-mahfuz? فأقضي ما تريد دون ما أريد. You think I should decree what you wish rather than what I wish? ويكون ما تحب دون ما أحب. You think things should happen what you desire or what I desire. فبعزتي حلفت لئن تلجلج هذا في صدرك مرة أخرى لأصلبنك ثوب النبوة ولأوردنك النار ولا أبالي. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this narration says, I swear, I take an oath by my own greatness, if such a thought occurs in your heart again, I will take away your prophethood and I will cast you into the fire, and it does not concern me, or it is not difficult for me. this is a very strong narration regarding how we see. It says in the Quran, لا يسأل أما يفعل وهم يسألون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be questioned about what he does. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be questioned. Yeah? All of creation will be questioned. Even the malaika, they say, will be questioned. Even Jibreel alayhi salam will be questioned. Did he take the message that he was commanded to give to the prophets? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to be questioned about his decree and why he did things, why he made the creation go along the way it did. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be questioned. And traditionally the ulama, this is the answer they used to give in the teaching of Aqidah. If any student asks the Shaykh, why does Allah do so and so, or why does Allah do this and that, the traditional response would be, لا يسأل عما يفعل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not questioned. So if you question, you're actually going against an ayah of Quran. You're going against an ayah of Quran if you question why Allah has done something. And this is what, even once when I studied in Fez in Morocco, with a very traditional Shaykh there in Qarawiyyin University, this is exactly the statement he gave. Because we had the Western students there, and you know what Western people are like. We have this attitude of questioning everything. So they were asking why, and he said, La yusalam ma yaf'al. He will not be questioned about what he does. It's not our position to question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But through the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are certain things that help us understand. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows a human being by his nature is going to question these things. So that's why in Surah Al-Kahf we have the story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, which gives us a lot of wisdom about these issues of how, Musa, he goes with Khidr alayhi salam, and Khidr says to him, don't ask me any questions about what I do, and I will explain later. But Musa alayhi salam is unable to keep sabr because of what he sees. So Khidr, first of all, they go in a ship which is by poor people, and Khidr alayhi salam, he makes a hole in the ship, so they start sinking. And they have, these are very poor people in the ship that own the ship, and they were giving them a lift. So Musa alayhi salam says, why did you do that? These poor people, this is their livelihood. They have this ship, all they can do is get the fish, and now you've destroyed their livelihood by making a hole in the ship. And on top of that, they were helping us by giving us a lift. So Khidr says to him, I told you, you won't be able to have sabr. And what did Khidr say at the beginning? كيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به علما أو خبرة. How can you have sabr on something that your knowledge doesn't encompass? It's a similar thing here. What did they say? Allah said to him, do you have knowledge of the unseen? To this prophet. In other words, our knowledge is so limited. We don't know. We don't see reality. We don't see everything. We don't see the whole picture. So Khidr said to him from the beginning, how can you have sabr on something that you're unable to encompass? Your knowledge is not going to encompass. But Musa alayhi salam said to him, no, please give me a chance. So this was the first question. And then he said to Khidr alayhi salam, just give me a chance, I forgot. I wasn't supposed to ask. Then they go on, they come to a group of boys, and there's a young boy below the age of puberty. Khidr alayhi salam beheads him. He kills him. Now here Musa alayhi salam actually remembers that he's not supposed to ask. But because of what he sees as such a great unfair thing, he's unable to restrain himself. So he says to him, you've just killed an innocent boy. You just killed an innocent boy. Because he was below the age of puberty. So once again, Khidr then says to him, I told you, you cannot keep sabr on something that you cannot encompass. So these are great wisdom in this story. And then the third one was the building of the wall in the qarya, in the village. The village people were very inhospitable to them, didn't give them food or shelter or anything. But Khidr alayhi salam then went and built the wall that was falling in the village, and Musa alayhi salam said, why did you do that when they were so inhospitable to us? What's the point of doing that? And we desperately need the money and food right now, so you could have asked them at least for something in return. So then afterwards Khidr alayhi salam explains to him the meaning of those three incidents. That ship, he made the hole in the ship because there was a tyrant king further down the river who was going along the river and seizing all of the people's ships, looting them, stealing everything. So by making the hole, he had made them get off the river, and that actually saved them from that tyrant king. So you see how what appeared to Musa alayhi salam was one thing, but what he didn't know, that a massive calamity had been averted because of that thing. A massive calamity. And these are things we can never know. Something might happen to you in your life, you feel, why is this, this is very difficult for me. Say I've lost my job, or something's happened, I've lost a child or something. You find it hard to understand. How do you know that if that did not happen, a much worse calamity would have come upon you? So these lines of possibilities are endless. We can never know what's going to happen on these different routes of our lives. So this is why we really have to try to keep a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever is happening is for the best. And then the boy, the young boy. And this is a question often many non-Muslims or atheists bring to religious people. If there is a God, why is there innocent kids being killed, and all these floods and all these things happening around the world? This is the main actually argument that they bring, atheists will bring. Any other arguments they bring are very often don't have much substance. This is the thing that they really have they bring a strong case against people who believe in God. So this story in Surah Al-Kahf really shines a light on this situation. That what does Khidr say? This boy I killed, his parents were righteous believers. So you might think that's strange then. His parents are righteous believers, but he killed his son. Why did he kill the son? The son was going to grow up and become a tyrant against his parents. He was going to become a disbeliever, and he was going to oppress his parents when he grew up. So out of the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the boy was killed, and Allah replaced him with, they have another child who would be a good believer and look after his parents when he grows up. So really it was a mercy for them. And the other thing is, don't forget, it's a mercy for the boy himself. Because if this boy grows up and becomes a kafir and a tyrant, he will be in hellfire. But if he is killed while he's a boy, he goes straight to Jannah. As the belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that all children go to Jannah, even if they're from the disbelievers or believers. There's quite extensive ikhtilaf and discussion about the thing, that the children of the disbelievers, where did they go? But most of the scholars said they will go to Jannah. Some said that they would be the people that would serve the people of Jannah and different things, but that's the strongest opinion, that they would be, because they're innocent, they haven't committed any sins. So these things with our eyes we might see and we can't understand these things. Why would these young kids be killed? But in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in reality, there's a great blessing in the whole thing. So then Imam al-Ghazali says, talking about the story about the Prophet, قلت فليستمع العاقل هذه السياسة العظيمة والوعيد الهائلة مع أنبيائه وأصفيائه وكيف مع غيرهم. Imam al-Ghazali rahmahullah says, let the intelligent person reflect upon this story of this Prophet that he told. The Prophet who complained about something to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, reflect upon this deeply that this is one of the prophets, this is one of the chosen people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How about if you are not one of the prophets? How would that be? You know? ثم استمع ما يقول لئن تلجلج هذا في صدرك مرة أخرى فهذا في حديث النفس وتردد القلب. And look where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to him, if this occurs in your heart again, you'll be thrown in the hellfire, etc. Yeah? Imam al-Ghazali says this is just something that occurs in the heart. Yeah? Just for something that occurs in the heart, not even he's spoken about it or complained about it, but just a thought, just a bad thought about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? Because it's a bad thought, it's a bad opinion about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فكيف بمن يصرخ ويستغيث ويشكو وينادي بالويل والثبور من ربه على رؤوس الملأ ويتخذ له أعوانا وأصحابا. He says, you know, this prophet simply thought this thought. What about people who actually express their distress or they express their anger against the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they shouting and screaming and all of these things? Yeah? How much worse is that? وَهَذَا لِمَنْ سَخَطَ مَرَّةً فَكَيْفَ مِمَّنْ هُوَ فِي السَّخَطِ عَلَى اللَّهِ فِي جَمِيعِ عُمْرِهِ. He said this is for a prophet who he had one thought of dissatisfaction against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qada. How about someone who this is always in their state? Yeah, this is always their state. How much worse is that? وَهَذَا لِمَنْ شَكَ إِلَيْهِ فَكَيْفَ مَنْ شَكَ إِلَى غَيْرِهِ. And finally, this prophet actually complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't complain to other people. He actually complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How about those people who complain to others and say these things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا ونسأله أن يعفو عنا ويغفر لنا سوء آدابنا ويصلحنا بحسن نظره إنه أرحم الراحمين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own selves and from the evil of our own actions, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and to have mercy on us and to forgive us all of our bad adab towards Him and to rectify us with His generosity. He is the most merciful of those who show mercy. فإن قيل فما معنى الرضا بالقضاء وحقيقة ذلك وحكمه. So then Imam al-Ghazali says, if you were to ask, what is the meaning of being pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the meaning of it? And what is the reality of it? And what is the ruling, the hukm? فَاعْلُمْ أَنَّ عُلَمَاءَنَا قَالُوا إِنَّ الرِّضَا تَرْكُ السَّخَطِ. So first of all, what's the meaning of rida, being pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So he says, know that our scholars have said that being pleased with the decree of Allah means not to have sakhat, not to have sakhat. Sakhat meaning anger or displeasure, dissatisfaction. وَسَخَط ذِكْرُ غير ما قضى الله تعالى بأنه أولى به وأصلح له فيما لا يستيقن فساده وصلاحه. هذا شرط فيه فاعلم ذلك. And what's the meaning of sakhat itself? Dissatisfaction or anger. It means that you believe something would have been better, something else would have been better than what Allah decreed. Something else would have been better than what Allah decreed. Even though you can have no way to know where is the salah and the fasad. Remember last lesson he was talking a lot about we can never know where is the best thing for us. we might be convinced that, doing a certain type of business or a certain type of thing, or getting married to a certain person is going to be best for us. But how can we don't really know. We never really know who's going to be the best person for us to marry, what's going to be the best job for us to do, because of just all the various possibilities of things that can happen is all within the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in other words, when we start thinking, no, A'udhu Billah, this should have happened, we are then disputing the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see? How can you know this girl that you really thought you should marry? How can you know that girl is going to be better for you for your deen? How can you know what will happen in your relationship after 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? There was once a true story, one of our teachers told us. In Damascus there was a sheikh. I forgot which sheikh it was now. Not of our generation, the generation, the teacher of our teacher's generation. In those days they used to have a lot of respect for their teachers, especially sheikhs, in teachers that teach you your deen. So this sheikh, he had gone to, one of his students was getting married, so he had gone for the marriage. And he was sitting there, the sheikh, and the student sitting there. And the bride is there. The bride's father, however, was looking gloomy and sad. So the sheikh called him over. He said, "Look, your daughter's getting married. It's a happy day. Why are you looking so distressed?" And he said to the sheikh, "Sheikh, how can I be happy when my younger daughter is getting married, but my older daughter is still not married? Who will marry her then afterwards?" So the sheikh said to him, "No." He said to his student, "No, you marry the older daughter. You marry the older daughter." The student immediately said, "Yes, I agree." Because that was the sort of respect they had for their sheikhs and teachers in those days. Yeah, so he married the older daughter of the man. Even though, especially amongst those, that tradition in Damascus and some places where it's considered much more preferable to marry younger person. But because of the respect of the sheikh, he said, "Yes, I will marry." And he married the older daughter. And then many years afterwards, that student, when he, later on, he always used to say that was the best thing I ever did, because she was such a righteous woman and a good wife and all of those things. So it just shows we have to follow the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trust in His decree, because we never know what's going to be better for us or worse for us. Okay. فإن قلت أليس الشرور والمعاصي بقضاء الله تعالى وقدره فكيف يرضى العبد بالشر ويلزم ذلك? If someone was to ask a question to Imam al-Ghazali, you're saying we should be pleased with the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but isn't it true that all even evil things or bad things that happen are also due to His qada? So how can you say that we should be pleased with things that are bad or evil that take place? Yeah, good question, huh? Probably sort of thing if Dr. Jamil was here, would have come ask that question. So what's the answer? Imam al-Ghazali says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الرِّضَى إِنَّمَا يُلْزِمُهُ بِالْقَضَاءِ وَقَضَاءُ الشَّرِّ لَيْسَ بِالشَّرِّ وَإِنَّمَا الشَّرُّ هُوَ الْمَقْضِي فَلَا يَكُونُ رِضًا بِالشَّرِّ. Now this is like a theological point, philosophical point. Imam al-Ghazali says, we are pleased with the qada. We have to be pleased with the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the decreeing of evil is not evil itself. And this is a very subtle but very important point we have to understand. That Allah decrees evil, but He does not do evil. He has decreed it, but He has not done. You know, I've told you that story of that once when we were being taught Aqidah in this course when I was studying myself, and one of the brother who was teaching us, you know, he said that Allah does good and does evil. And I raised my hand and said to him, you can't say that Allah does evil. And he was insisting upon, no, you can say that. And this was a knowledgeable brother who was studying out himself Aqidah and all these things. And so then I approached one of the teachers, the person who was the main teacher of the course, Shaykh Yusuf, and I said to him, look Shaykh, this is what the brother was saying, can you say that? And he said, no. And then he went to the front of the class and clarified to the class that no, we don't say that Allah does evil. So it's a very fine distinction, but very important as well, because it's not within Allah's attributes to be evil. Allah's attribute is al-Bar, He is the good. So yes, He has created evil, we can say. He has created evil. He has created evil. But He is not Himself evil or does evil or bad. Or in another way that's easier for us to comprehend, He allows for it to happen. Yeah? He allows for it to happen. But the person, the human being or the jinn, whoever decides to do that, has taken that choice themselves. This is the whole thing about free will. You know, we have a choice to do good or bad. And none of us can come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and say, oh Allah, we didn't have a choice. It was all decreed, as some of the Jabariya fell into that trap. You know? Because the fact that we have free will is something we attest to every day, every moment of our life. Every moment of your life you're making choices and you're doing things from your own volition. There's no need to prove that there's such thing as free will. Yeah? So this is the same thing Imam al-Ghazali is saying here. Yes, no, we don't say we are pleased with the evil act itself, but we do say we're pleased by the one who decrees everything, good and evil. So often the best way we look at it is we say we believe in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever He created, good or bad. أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق. من شر ما خلق. We seek refuge with Allah from the bad or the evil. I don't think evil is the best translation of shar, but I don't know a better translation. Shar is anything bad.
So
That He created.
Vices and sins.
Vices and sins.
Correct.
I'm not sure if evil is. I have to look into it more deeply, but I think evil is perhaps not the best way to translate it. Maybe vices or sins might be better. Anyway, we seek from the evil or sin that He has created. He has created. So we believe there's a wisdom in all of these things. It says in the Quran, with all of these, this is like this is a very deep secret, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This whole, the purpose of creation. This is to do with the purpose of creation. It's a very deep secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but there are clues in the Quran. There are hints in the Quran. If we find them, like Imam al-Ghazali says in one of his other books, the Quran contains certain gems. All of the ayahs of Quran are gems, but there are some that are more precious than others. Imam al-Ghazali says that specifically, and obviously this is something that is debated among scholars, because some did say no, we can't say any one ayah is more preferable to another. But Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah took the position clearly that no, some are more precious. And he gave several proofs of this, like the many hadith we have about Surah Al-Ikhlas, for example, Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Fatiha, many hadith about fada'il of certain surahs. And Ayatul Kursi, we know, is the most powerful or the highest ayah in the Quran. It says, so why is that? You know? So there's many... so that's when we go into the Quran and reflect upon the Quran and recite the Quran, we can find these secrets and wisdoms that are hidden there for us. But it's all to do with approaching the Quran with a pure heart, with making an effort to purify ourselves, and then going to the Quran and then reading the Quran and reflecting upon the Quran. That's where those secrets from the Quran will come to us. So the purpose of creation is there in the Quran if we dig deeply and find it there. So, but for us as normal Muslims, we simply say we trust that there is a wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in everything that He created and decreed. In the good and the evil that He created and decreed, we believe there's a great wisdom, even if we can't see the wisdom ourselves. But for those who want to, they will find the answers, those wisdoms, in the Quran itself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give tawfiq.
It's like the one with that, one of the examples that was given was with the Great Fire of London. It destroyed, I think, 2/3 of London, but it wiped out the bubonic plague. But at the time, no one could understand that whole of London was destroyed. But if it wasn't for a fire, the plague would have wiped out the whole of London.
Yeah, it's a good example. Good example. There's something you might think is such a terrible, I think we mentioned this before you came in as well. You might see something as a terrible tragedy, but you don't realize it has averted a greater calamity. Yeah? It's averted a greater calamity. That was the story of Musa Khidr when he made the hole in the boat. You know? It seemed like a very bad thing he did, but it averted a greater calamity, which we often will never know until Yawm al-Qiyamah. We'll probably find out. Some of these things that happen in our life that we thought were very difficult, on Yawm al-Qiyamah we'll find out maybe they were better for us. Yeah? Or like this person, the student of the Shaykh who married the older girl. He might have thought it's a minor calamity, but then later on he realized this was a great blessing for him. Yeah? وقد قال شيوخنا رحمهم الله المقضيات أربعة نعمة وشدة وخير وشر. So some of the scholars have explained it in such. The maqdiyat are the things which are decreed. So and this is the other way Imam al-Ghazali tries to help us to understand. He says, we are pleased with the qada, but not necessarily with the maqdi. We're pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it doesn't mean we're pleased with the thing that is decreed. When the act of evil takes place, we're not pleased with that. But we're still pleased with Allah's decree because we know there's a great wisdom in it. So some scholars said the things that are decreed are four: a blessing, a hardship, good and evil. We'll just call shar evil for now, or sin. Blessing, hardship, good, evil. These are the four type of things that could be decreed. فالنعمة يجب الرضا فيما بالقاضي والقضاء والمقضي. If Allah has decreed a blessing for you, a blessing like, let's say He decreed for you to fast in Ramadan or go for Hajj or give your pious children. Yeah? In this case, we should be pleased with the one who has decreed, with the decree, and with the thing decreed. ويجب عليه الشكر من حيث أنه نعمة وإظهار المنة عليه بإبدائه أثر النعمة. And in this case, it's obligatory to have gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to manifest the ni'mah What does that mean, manifest this blessing? فَبِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ فَحَدِّثْ. In Surah al-Duha, it says to proclaim the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, this is the one thing people often get confused about. Are you showing off, or are you proclaiming the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So it is actually considered good to, if Allah has given you blessings, to actually proclaim them in a way of giving shukr for them. Yeah? But we have to be careful, very careful, that we don't fall into other sin of showing off or things like that at the same time. والشدة يجب الرضا فيها بالقاضي والقضاء والمقضي ويجب عليه الصبر من حيث إنها شدة. If a hardship is decreed for us, such as say an illness or other things like that, in this case, once again, we should be pleased with the one who decreed it, the decree and the thing that is decreed. And it's obligatory for us in this case to have sabr, to have patience. والخير يجب الرضا فيه بالقاضي والقضاء والمقضي ويجب عليه ذكر المنة من حيث أنه خير وفقه له. If Allah decrees for us to do good actions like fasting, Ramadan, etc., then once again we are pleased with the one who decreed the decree and the thing decreed, and it's obligatory for us once again to show gratitude for this, because we thank Allah for giving us tawfiq for doing this good action. والشر يجب عليه فيه الرضا بالقاضي والقضاء والمقضي من حيث إنه مقضي لا من حيث إنه شر، وكونه مقضيا يرجع إلى القاضي والقضاء بالحقيقة، وهذا كما أنك ترضى مذهب المخالف أن يكون معلوما لك لا أن يكون مذهبا لك. ثم كونه معلوما يرجع إلى العلم، فالرضا والمحبة إنما يكون بالحقيقة للعلم بمذهب الغير لا بمذهبه، فكذلك الرضا بالمقضي. So then the final one was when Allah decreed something, a sin. Allah has decreed the sin to take place. So once again we should be pleased with the one who decrees it, with the decree and with the thing decreed, but not from the aspect that it is a sin, only from the aspect that it is something that is decreed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you make this very subtle distinction here. Where you see sins taking place, for example, we don't say we're pleased with the sin itself, the sinful act or the sinful thing. But we still say we're pleased with the one who decreed it, and we believe he has a wisdom in everything he decreed. Yeah? And then, can anyone translate the last bit there about he gives an example of if you're pleased with the, have you know got the English of that? I couldn't quite follow that.
The reality of a false religion.
Yeah.
Let's take an example. Suppose you are trying to know the reality of a false religion and you agree to this effort. This action of yours will not be regarded as your agreement to the false religion because you do not want to embrace that religion. You are only studying it for the sake of knowledge and information about it. In the same way here, also your agreement in the cause of some vice does not mean that you are agreeing to it because you approve of it. You are agreeing only to the divine decree concerning the vice.
Okay. فإن قيل فالراضي هل يكون مستزيدا؟ Another question someone might ask, if you're saying we should be pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does that mean we shouldn't ask Allah for more? We shouldn't ask Allah for more, or should we be pleased with His decree? So he says, no, we should ask for more. We should always ask and make dua, but only with the condition that what you're asking for, you ask Allah with the condition that it's something which has salah for you, it's something which is going to be good for you, for your deen, your akhirah. Don't just ask Allah that you definitely want one thing, like, so the example of the woman to marry is a good one. Yeah? So you convince you want to marry one particular person, and you ask Allah, no, I want that particular person. Yeah? Rather than saying, oh Allah, I would like to marry this person if it is better for me in my deen and my akhirah and all of these things. Yeah, so that's the point he makes. No, we do make dua, but don't make it certainty in a certain thing which you cannot be sure if it's better for you or not. If it's something you know for sure is better for you, like remember there were certain things like the 5 daily prayers, then of course you can make dua. You don't have to say if it is better for me if I pray Dhuhr or Asr, because you know something is fard, you have to pray. Yeah? But remember, even there, some scholars said even there you can't be 100% sure. Because there can be a rare occasion where you're praying the fard can be sinful. For example, if someone's about to be fallen down a well and you can save them and you carry on praying your fard, you're actually sinful. So even there, some said you have to still say if it is better for me. You know, if you're making dua for something, always put it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. وَلَا يُخْرِجُهُ ذَلِكَ عَنِ الرِّضَاءِ. So asking for things does not mean that you're not pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بل أن يدل على رضاه فهو أولى. فإن من عجبه شيء ورضي ذلك استزاد منه. He said, in fact, it means that you are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you're asking Him, you're not asking other people or going after things from creation. You're pleased and you're asking Him for more. And so he mentions about the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا حَضَرَ اللَّبَنِ, when he used to have milk. His dua, what was the sunnah dua? Allahumma barik lana fihi wa zidna minhu. Oh Allah, give us barakah in this drink of milk and give us more. وفي غيره يقول وزدنا خيرا منه. If it was something other than milk, he would say, oh Allah, give us more, something better. Give us more of something better. But if it was milk, he would say, give us more of this. In other words, milk is one of the best things that you can get. I don't want to go into too much of a digression, but the milk is mentioned in the Quran, you know. There's only very few things mentioned in the Quran as specifically which are good for our physical health. Very explicitly mentioned. There's honey is mentioned. There's Quran itself, reciting Quran as a shifa is mentioned. And milk is mentioned, you know. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in one ayah, we give you the drink from these cattle, you know. We give you to drink a pure drink. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, we are giving you this drink. You know, so it's very powerful ayah of Quran, that it is a pure, nourishing drink that comes, it says, from between the intestine and the blood. And I think I mentioned before, I was listening to one professor on the radio, and she was very much talking about the benefits of raw milk. You know, raw milk that hasn't been heated up and treated and everything. Is very, very, there's more increasing studies coming out now about the benefits of raw milk, which has not been pasteurized, heated up. The reason why it's so beneficial is because it has got a lot of antibodies in there, which can make our immune system very strong. So some studies they did in the University of London, one of the colleges here, they found that they were giving kids 1 or 2 glasses of raw milk in a week, just 1 or 2 glasses in a week, and they found quite massive reduction in the levels of eczema, hay fever and things like that, which are allergic diseases. to do with the immune system. So many people now, especially amongst certain types of people, they're more into drinking raw milk because of the health benefits. Once you heat up that milk, when you pasteurize it, all of those white blood cells and proteins, antibodies, they're all denatured, they're broken up, so they no longer have their effect. So this professor, the other amazing thing she said was, this was her own word, she said, the milk from the cow, the raw milk, is the white blood of the cow. It's the white blood. And what she meant was, it's the blood with the red cells taken out. But everything else is there, that's in the blood. All the proteins, the enzymes, nutrients, the antibodies, white cells, everything is there. Just the red cells, red blood cells, which are used to carry oxygen, they're taken out. And that just reminded me of when it says in the Quran, between the intestines and the blood. You know? Or dam, literally the word blood is there. So milk is very nutritious.
The same with the mother milk, if somebody is feeding with the mother milk, IgG or something more, they don't get less asthma and things like that.
Yeah, of course, yeah. The mother's milk as well also has all of the antibodies that you need, that the child needs, for the early life. But anyway, just interesting that the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to drink milk, he would say, give us more of it. But when drinking different drink, he would say, give us a better drink than that, and more. But with milk, he said, give us more. Now, you'll find some statements of some of the Sufi sheikhs, like for example Jalaluddin Rumi, in the Mathnawi, he says at one point, or in his sometimes in his biographies, it's mentioned that he never made dua to Allah, because he was pleased with what Allah has given him. Yeah? So he didn't make dua. He said, I'm pleased with what Allah has given me. But this is not the norm, this is not the sunnah. So it's quite important to understand the distinction why this happens, is because that person is in a certain state at that time. That certain state is between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the state that he's in, he's feeling it's between him and Allah. He feels no need to make dua. He's completely satisfied with whatever is happening at that time. But the norm is that we make dua, and this is clear from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. As you know, in the Battle of Badr, in the beginning of the Battle of Badr, before they start the fight, the Prophet ﷺ was making so much dua that in fact Abu Bakr actually came and stopped him. He was making so much dua that Allah saved, for the Muslims, not for himself, but for the Muslims that were there. And the concern for them that eventually Abu Bakr actually came and said to the Prophet ﷺ, just leave it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give his promise, will fulfill his promise. فإن قلت لم يذكر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الاستثناء وشرط الخير والصلاح. Then he says, if someone were to say that, in the dua that we have from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it doesn't always mention the istithna and the salah, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asking for things, but he wasn't always saying, oh Allah, if it is better for me in my deen, or better for me in my akhirah. He was just simply asking Allah for certain things. So Imam al-Ghazali then explains, yes, of course this is true, you don't have to actually say it every time, but it's something that is to do with the heart, that you understand this, you have this intention. When you ask Allah for something, you have that intention that if it's better for you in your deen, you don't have to actually verbalize it every time. وإنما يقال باللسان عبارة عن ذلك فلا معتبر بترك عبارة مع حصوله بالقلب فاعلم ذلك موفقا راشدا. So that's the end of the section on the qada. Any questions about that?
If someone has doubts about any divine decree and start questioning what's the best thing to do to actually remove those questions or doubts?
Sacred knowledge and ulama as well. To come to these type of circles once a week is very valuable. And I think all Muslims should attempt to go somewhere at least once a week to a gathering of where there's some sort of reminders or knowledge is being imparted. Because that keeps us actually refreshed as well, keeps us in the forefront of our mind. I know this is valuable for me, myself. If I didn't have these classes, I'm benefiting from them as much as anyone else, because it's a reminder all the time. Then so when certain things do happen, then we have this in the forefront of our mind. The wisdoms that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has, that we cannot always see. The story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam. All of these things, so it's a reminder. So often people who are sort of a bit far away from that type of understanding or reminders, or they don't read Quran regularly, they will sometimes run into these type of difficulties. Then it can be quite difficult then, because by then it's a bit late as well. So for all of us, it's important to try to protect ourselves from before, to make our iman stronger. But that's basically the thing, is to just remind them. Remember Allah, there's a wisdom in everything that happens. Allah has a wisdom. We could remind them about some of these, hadith or things. And reassure them.
Even Imam Ghazali had doubts, which led to his sojourn to the Sham and on to Hajj, and he left everything behind. In one of his books, I can't remember the name, but what's that?
Deliverance from error.
Not only that one, there's another one I read. It's a short book, but in that he mentions that he went through a period where he didn't even consider himself a believer, and he had to leave and abandon to save his faith, basically.
Yeah, obviously Imam al-Ghazali is a unique case. That was like a theological doubt, he had a philosophical doubt. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala saved him from that, and he mentions in detail, but for him, obviously that was a key event of his life to come. He went out of faith and back to faith, and then obviously we see the effect that he had then from all of his writings and everything. So that was a key event, for him to then become the great theologian that he became. We can see now the wisdom of him going through that process. If someone has been through that process themselves, then they can also then, see what I mean? Explain why we believe in Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Basically that was his thing, about not trusting if we can't trust our eyes and ears and things like that. I don't want to go into it right now, but yeah, it's correct. This might be slightly different. People who something very difficult happens and they can't really understand why Allah is doing this, and then they start getting this type of anger and this dissatisfaction with the qada of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. It's mentioned in the Quran. The people who worship Allah upon a harf, upon a knife edge. It says that in the Quran. There's certain people that worship Allah as if they're upon an edge, meaning their iman is very weak. But so when things are going well, they're praying and they're feeling good and they're saying Allah is being nice to me and everything. As soon as some hardship comes, they fall. Why is Allah giving me? Why is this happening? So this is to do with very weak iman as well. But there's some people are going through such difficult things as well around the world, especially in some of these war zones that people live in nowadays. That it's, we should really thank Allah every day that we're not in that situation, because it can become a big fitna for people's iman sometimes as well. So that's why when we see people coming through those type of things and they still have got that strong iman, like some of these brothers and sisters in Afghanistan and places like that, going through all of that but still having their iman, that's a very, very strong iman, There's other people I know personally who have gone to certain places, from here, some young brothers, I'm going for jihad and getting all like worked up and everything. And they've gone to some places like Somalia or Bosnia back in the 80s and have come back and just totally destroyed them psychologically. Because they went into a thing but they weren't ready. The Iman wasn't ready for it. They got caught up with all these like charismatic preachers, telling them go for jihad and sort of glamorizing the whole thing, and when these people come back here, then they're like, oh, he's been for jihad. It's like a big, reputation type of thing. So these young brothers get all enthusiastic, go, and it's very difficult, Some of them get put in prisons and all sorts of things happen to them. They weren't ready. The Iman was not ready for that thing. So very important, to have go attend a weekly gathering. It could be a dhikr gathering, but as long as they do a talk or something as well, like a reminder, it's very important. Really, the Jummah should have that function, but nowadays it doesn't. We haven't got that. But that's what the Jummah is there for. If you go to a place like Syria, I lived in Syria for a few years, you see very much that function of the Jummah taking place. Because you see every week these people are coming to the mosque. Everyone comes for Jummah. There's very few people that don't come for Jummah. And they sit for a good 45 minutes. They're listening to the khatib. And the very strict rules about not speaking in Jummah as well. Every Muslim knows that. You're not allowed to speak. So people sit silently for the whole 45 minutes and they listen to that khatib. And it has got a massive effect, every week you get that reminder. It's very important just for having this basic, this basic type of thing about being pleased with Allah's decree, sabr. Ideally the Jummah should take that place. So that's why it's very important in our masjids here to have the khutbahs in English, to have people giving khutbahs that can actually speak English properly as well. And just give that reminder to people, especially younger people that are growing up in this society. Very important for us to try to reactivate the Jummah gatherings.
Just going to say what you read there, where we translated evil. From the hadith, or khayrihi or sharrihi, from the good and the bad. Just
the bad, bad might be better, I think.
It's all encompassing. And Prince Charles was the person who advocates raw milk.
Prince Charles definitely, he drinks raw milk.
Is it because the sunnah to drink milk, is it, if you're following, is it any type of milk, or because it was goat's milk, wasn't it?
Goat's milk, camel milk, but also cow's milk can come into it. The actual ayah of Quran, I think it just says an'am, which can include all of them. These animals. The main sunnah ones obviously was goat and camels.
Because these days we see a lot of allergies, like a lot of people are intolerant, lactose intolerant, or they can't, even children, they can't really drink normal milk, so they drink other types like soya or lactose-free milk or these kind of things.
Then obviously that's different.
But these milks we are getting, they are going through the different process of pasteurization, so you don't know what is happening,
Well, the question is why they lactose intolerance as well. Obviously, we don't know what causes it.
Isn't it? Because if it's raw, you can still drink it. The lactose intolerant. The enzymes aren't destroyed. When you boil it, it gets destroyed.
Look into that. Maybe I'll look into that.
We have to get it from a clean place.
Yeah, that's the thing. You see, there's propaganda against raw milk. The propaganda against it is that you can get certain infections and stuff. But this is the key point. It's not the milk itself. It's actually if it's done in an unclean environment. And nowadays, people who produce raw milk, they're under very tight regulations to have a very clean environment, the gloves they use, the bucket, everything is very clean. So therefore there's no actual risk of it. So as long as you get it from a proper, someone who's got a good approval, hygiene and all of that, the milk itself doesn't give any type of infections. Like you might see this propaganda like it can give you TB or things like that, but it's not the milk itself. It's if they use unclean buckets or things like that with their milk, which they won't do in this country. You won't have that type of thing anymore.
Moreover, scientifically, milk is a balanced diet. So it is not only religion and reduces and also that. Everybody knows that, so in that way also. And coming back to your raw milk, when I was a child, before going to school, this was a belief in Pakistan, that they used to, some of them, they used to drink the raw milk, and we as a child, before going to school, they say, this is very powerful. And can you see this Pahalwan,
Pahalwan, yeah.
He is drinking it. And some of them, not only that, they used to go and directly into the teat and drink the milk from it. So this I'm talking about 55 years ago. So if this scientist has said, as Dr. Ridhwan is saying, then it must be true.
Oh yes, but quite a lot accumulating evidence now. It's getting quite popular. It's getting quite popular now. But yeah, just watch out if you do look it up about this, if you see this thing, because obviously there's powerful industry that's against it. That people who make pasteurized milk, they're a powerful lobby group, so they have they'll put out these sort of slightly misinformation about how, it can give you, TB or these things, but they don't really explain. It's not the milk itself, it's actually, that used to happen in the past, say 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when they actually have very unclean, environment where they were milking the cows.
We're getting quite unusual diseases nowadays. We've got a lot of allergy type reaction.
Yeah.
A lot of unusual allergies.
Yeah. That's why this raw milk is very good to protect against allergies. Okay, al-Arid al-Rabi', the fourth hindrance, الشدائد والمصائب وإنما كفايتها بالصبر. So once again linked to the previous three, to do with qada and tawakkul, etc. The fourth one is الشدائد والمصائب, difficulties and hardships. If we face difficulties and hardships, this can obviously distract us from our goal of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way to overcome this hindrance is to have sabr, patience. Because actually when we have sabr in the face of hardships and difficulties, this is even better for us than doing acts of ibadat, in terms of raising our status in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of bringing us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the quickest way. The quickest way to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is if we have hardships, that we have sabr. Because as they say in the, they have some certain sayings in English, don't they? Like, what is it? Proof is in the pudding or something. I can't remember now.
Patience is a virtue.
Patience is a virtue, yeah. But when you're really tested, that's when, it's easy to claim we have iman, in other words, But when the real test comes, that's when, like they say, gold is tested in the fire. To test if it's gold, we test it in the fire. So that's how we test it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our test easy for us and give us sabr.
Can I just ask this, is there a saying or hadith about the first sabr is the first sabr?
Sadmatul ula, yeah, sadmatul ula, and the sadmatul ula. The sabr. Patience is in the first affliction. I think you might mention it later on. Does he mention it later on? It's a hadith, yeah, it's a very famous hadith. About the woman, when she had lost someone, and the Prophet ﷺ said to her, have sabr, and she said, you don't know what's, you're not going through what I'm going through. But she didn't realize it was the Prophet ﷺ. And later on when she realized, she said, then she was sorry and everything. But then the Prophet ﷺ said, the sabr is in the first instance. So when the thing first comes, the tribulation, that's when you have to have sabr. That's the big test. Later on, of course, then we'll realize and we'll think about it, and then we'll think, oh yeah, we must have sabr. But when it happens straight away, that's when we have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why if we're people who regularly remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it will be easier for us to remember Him when we have these tribulations. So if we're people who do our 5 daily prayers, read some Quran, do some dhikr, every day in a regular, when the tribulation comes, inshallah ta'ala, you're more ready then you remember Allah because you're someone who remembers Allah every day, throughout the day. Whereas if you're someone who's far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't remember Him every day, you don't do your prayers, etc., then it will be much more difficult when difficulties come. فعليك بالصبر في المواطن وإنما ذلك لأمرين أحدهما التوسل إلى الإبادة وحصول المقصود منها فإن مبنى أمر العبادة كله على الصبر واحتمال المشقات. So it says, we have to have sabr, and there's 2 reasons. The first reason is because this will allow us to get to a perfect state of ibadah, which is the whole purpose of what this whole book is all about. Remember, Minhaj al-Abidin. We want to get to a perfect state of ibadah. This is the purpose of our creation, to do ibadah, to worship Allah, to serve Allah. And sabr is the way to get to that. So it says all of ibadah, everything to do with ibadah is built upon sabr, and to bear difficulties. فمن لم يكن صبورا لم يصل إلى شيء منها بالحقيقة. Whoever is not have patient, then he will not reach any of this. وذلك أن قصد عبادة الله تعالى وتجرد لها وذلك أن من قصد عبادة الله تعالى وتجرد لها استقبلته شدائد محن ومصائب من وجوه. The person who has made this sincere intention to reach to this stage of being abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has devoted himself to this mission, hardships will come, tribulations will come to him. أحدها أنه لا عبادة إلا وفي نفسها مشقة. So firstly, why? Because every ibadah has some sort of difficulty in it as well. Every ibadah. Even your 5 daily prayers, there's some difficulty there. Mashaqqa. Getting up for Fajr sometimes. Praying sometimes when you're in a difficult situation, you're on the road, it's raining, or difficult situations you may be in, where you have to do your prayer, the mashaqqa is there. Sometimes it's easy, if you're at home and you're relaxed, or in a situation where it's easy, sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it can be difficult. Ramadan, fasting of Ramadan, nowadays when it's become such long days, mashaqqa, Hajj, etc. ولذلك ورد كل هذا الترغيب فيه ووعد الثواب عليه. This is why there's so many hadith, and the Quran is exhorting us and encouraging us to do all of these acts of ibadah, because there are difficulty in there. So we need a lot of encouragement to know what's going to be our reward for it. Whereas really it should be enough for us to know that Allah commanded it. It should be enough for us to do it, but because of our nature and because of the hardship in the ibadah, we're told about a lot of the rewards that we get to encourage us more. إذ لا يتأتى فعل الإبادة إلا بقمع الهواء وقهر النفس إذ هي زاجرة عن الخير والرشد ومخالفة الهوى وقهر النفس من أشد الأمور على الإنسان. So yeah, just that there's a lot of to do these acts of ibadah, you have to go against your desires. Yeah? To wake up for your prayer, you have to go against your desire to sleep. Because the nafs and the desires are always opposing what are good acts, majority of the time. Yeah? Like we've said before, occasionally there are things where the act that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also pleasing to your nafs. And that's fine. If that happens, that's fine. Yeah? Sometimes myself and Shaykh Thaqib was saying for a joke, sometimes we should compile a list of the 40 hadith, which are those things which are also pleasing to your nafs. Things like breaking your fast when you're with your Muslim brothers, having a meal with them. There are things where the desires will go along with what the deen also prescribes. And also, as one's iman becomes stronger, more and more of your desires go in line with what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. This is what I'm mentioning one of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, that one of the signs of iman is when the hawa, the desire, becomes in line with what the sharia says as well. Yeah? So this is a sign of someone's iman is becoming strong, where they start loving those things like prayer or these things, dhikr, etc., reading Quran, and they start hating things which are disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? Just the thought of doing those acts, sinful acts, become repugnant, repulsive to them. It's a good sign of iman. وثانيها أن العبد إذا فعل الخير مع المشقة لزمه الاحتياط له حتى لا يفسد عليه والإبقاء على العمل أشد من العمل. The second reason why we will come across these difficulties and tribulation is because even when you do a good action that involves some difficulty, we then have to also be careful that the action is going to be accepted and is not going to become corrupted. And in fact, Imam al-Ghazali says to actually remain upon an action is difficult, more difficult than starting the action itself. For example, we start a regular reciting of Quran. The first few days we're a lot of enthusiastic. Yeah? After a week, 2 weeks, then our himmah starts falling off. This then becomes the sabr, the patience. We have to keep the thing regular. Keep the thing regular. Because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually loves more, is if you do something but regularly, even if it's small. Start something and just keep upon it. So when it comes 5 years later, you're still doing that thing. 10 years later, you're still doing that thing. 20 years later, you're still doing that thing. That's a true action. That's a real action. It's no true action if you've done something 5 days, 2 weeks, 2 months and you leave it. It's good, inshallah, you get some reward probably, but that's not one of those true actions that's going to really strengthen your iman. The polishing of the heart is like the drop of water upon the stone. Yeah? If you have a rock, if you have a drop of water, drop, 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 you come back after 5 years, you'll see the mark. Yeah? Maybe it'll be a small hollow there. Yeah? If you got that same amount of water and you pour it on there with a bucket, you have no effect. So that's why that's to do with sabr. وثالثها أن الدار دار محنة فمن كان فيها لا بد له من الابتلاء بشدائدها ومصائبها. He said the third reason why we come across these difficulties is simply because this world that we're in, the dunya that we're in, is a world of tribulation, as it says in the Quran on several occasions. So whoever is in this world, they have to have some type of tribulation. It says in the Quran, لَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, we will definitely test you in this world. That's why we're in the world. So that's why we should ask Allah to make our tribulation easy, our test easy. But we don't say to Allah, don't give us any test, because then you're going against the Quran. وذلك أقسام المصيبة من الأهل والقرابات والإخوان والأصحاب بالموت والفقد والفراق. So then he says the different types of tribulations, we can divide them into different categories, the tribulations that come across us. The first category is the tribulation that comes from our family and near relatives and friends. And this type of tribulation is things like people who die that are close to you, or they're lost, or you part from them. Yeah? This is a tribulation. We have to have sabr through these type of tribulations. وفي النفس بأنواع الأمراض والأوجاع. The second category of tribulation is in our own self, in our own bodies or minds. And this will be things like sicknesses, pain, illnesses. وفي الأرض بقتال الناس إياه. And then the third category could be a tribulation in our ird, in our honor. In our honor. This could be, for example, people who attack us, fight us, etc. If you're fighting against an enemy and they, coming into your homes and raiding you and things like that. والطمع فيه والإزوراء به والغيبة له والكذب عليه. And then in our ird, once again in our honor, people who are slandering, backbiting, lying about us, things like that, all of this is considered to be a tribulation as well. Nowadays we live in an age when some of these things are lost, the concept of honor is practically almost lost, which used to always was such an important thing amongst human societies, not just Muslim but any human societies. There were certain things they valued very highly, like honor, truth. These type of things were valued so highly, but now in modern Western culture is lost. It doesn't even have any meaning anymore.
There's, I think it's a story related to either Imam Bukhari or Imam Ghazali. He was on a journey on a ship, and one of the guys got talking to him, and it transpired that all his life savings was with Imam Ghazali, or Imam Bukhari had all his life savings with him. So as the journey progresses, the guy who learns that he's got all his life savings with him, he goes and tells the captain that his bag's been robbed and it's got all his money in it. And so they check everyone's bag one by one, and in the Imam's possession he hasn't got any bags. And so when they reach the port, he says, I thought you had your life savings with them, what did you do with it? He goes, I threw it overboard because all my honor was more important to me than my wealth, because if I was implicated in this, all the years of my study would have gone wasted. And the point that the Imam was trying to emphasize was that honor is more important than wealth.
Exactly, yeah. This used to be so important for people, they would even give their life then to be, their honor to be lost.
It was al-Bukhari.
It was Imam Bukhari.
even in this Western tradition, you know, in Europe they used to have this concept of word of honor. You know, I give you my word. It means I give you my word of honor. If a gentleman said that, then he would rather be killed or die than break that word. You know, that's the whole concept of word of honor.
You even had it in the parliament. That's why they have to stay a separate a length apart. Is the length that they can draw swords. So the amount of paces. So that's still something that was in even in modern culture, so to speak. But with all the expenses scandal, there's not honor left.
Yeah, I mean the whole word has just become meaningless now in contemporary culture. You know, because it's just not because they're so far away from sort of religious teachings as well, things like that. You know, just it has no meaning anymore.
Whereas I think in places like, say, Japan or something, they still have a bit of a concept of that, where like if the train is 5 minutes late, it would be a really big deal, and it would be bring in a different way, but shame
Big
to that
shame
company
to
and that driver.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. In many traditional cultures you still have, don't you, these things. But as the world becomes more and more westernized, I'm guessing it will go. In a way it's inevitable. If you have a materialist scientific belief, if that's your belief, you know, like in Europe, at least the majority of indigenous Europeans, they don't believe in Christianity anymore. So they believe in science. Why would you have any, you know, why would you have such a thing as honor? Science is telling you you're just a complex machine. You're just a whole, you're millions of molecules put together, but that's all you are, you know. So those sort of things don't have much meaning. The famous philosopher called Nietzsche, who sort of predicted that this is where Western civilization was going, towards a vacuum, like a moral vacuum, you know. Because there's nothing to really, there's no morality, there's no basis for it anymore for them, you know. Because people who have a religious tradition, they have a sort of a framework, you know, why is something good or bad? There's a reason for it. But if you think, if you're a Western person who doesn't have no religion, you believe just in science. After you die, you're just going to decompose. It's just you're going to live your life just trying to maximize your own happiness. Yeah. I mean, yes, you'll find some people that will take certain moral higher ground, let's say, just for purely philosophical reasons, rational reasons. But it's so rare. You can't expect all human beings to be like that. That's where Western civilization has just taken the wrong turn. You can't take religion away from, because religion is not a powerful force that will keep people on the right track. You see what I mean? There's the threat of hellfire is there. If you take away all of that, afterlife, and you just say to people, look, you just have to be good for the sake of being good, for a philosophical aspiration, how many people are actually going to do that? Probably 1 in a million. You know, you will find some, I'm not saying there'll be none, but very few. And the MPs is an excellent example. These MPs, you know, it suddenly all come to light how much corruption there was, how much they're doing dodgy deals, as long as no one finds out. Because there's no threat for an after, there's no threat of a punishment, there's no Yawm al-Qiyamah, there's no judgment to come, so why wouldn't they try to get away with it, you know? There may be a few of them that actually took a moral, just for the sake of morality itself, you know. I would not do that, you know. But few people you'll find of that nature, you know? When it comes to fulfilling your desires, you know, getting a bit of extra money, I'd rather just bend the rules a little bit, you know. What's going to stop me?
it's the way that they have the life in it. They very successful in their careers, and when they make their millions, then they want to go into politics to make a name for themselves. Then they try and vie for president or prime ministership, and then they devote to philanthropy, and that's just a pattern in life. And as soon as they've left public office, they have no real inclination. It's like, taking like Tony Blair as an example, I'd be surprised if he pays any taxes in the UK, and he's sold his memoirs, and he went against so many protocols that were even held conservative amongst living prime ministers, not to do X, Y, Z, or not to do X, Y, Z within 5 years of leaving office. He just broke all those protocols. And so it just shows you that it's just more of a celebrity and a nihilistic culture that they want to propagate.
Deteriorating,
yeah.
Isn't it? Going back to so there was four different categories of hardship. So that's honor. One can be an honor. Fulfill mal, and then the fourth category, a tribulation in your wealth. Bidhiha was zawal, so people going bankrupt or becoming poor, etc. ولكل واحدة من هذه المصائب لذغة وحرقة من نوع آخر. فيحتاج إلى صبر عليها كلها وإلا فيمنعه الجزع والتلهف من التفرغ للعبادة فيمنعه الجزع والتلهف من التفرغ للعبادة. So these are the different categories of the type of difficulties we may encounter. And what Imam al-Ghazali is saying, that we must have sabr in all of these different types of situations. Whether it's difficult in our honor, in our wealth, in our families, in our own physical selves. Otherwise, if we don't have sabr, then becoming anxious or all of these things is just going to, once again, not going to allow us to focus on what we're trying to do, which is ibadah. ورابعها أن طالب الآخرة أشد أن طالب الآخرة أشد ابتلاء وأكثر محبة محنة. I think it should be محنة, isn't it? You got محنة, I've got محبة. ومن كان إلى الله تعالى أقرب فالمصائب له في الدنيا أكثر والبلاء عليه شد. And it's a very important point that I think we've mentioned a few times. The people who are striving more to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually they will expect to have more difficulties and tribulations. You know, the more precious the thing that you seek, the more difficult it becomes. And there's nothing more precious than the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is what we seek. The presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, coming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing more precious, so there's nothing more difficult as well. But at the same time, not to put people off and to give them hope, don't forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you as well. You know, the one who takes one step towards Him, He will take many steps towards them. So even though it's difficult, at the same time it's easy. It's the most difficult, but it's the most easy as well. Look at the Prophet ﷺ, his life was the most difficult of lives. Orphaned, they never saw his father, mother died, grandfather then died, his wife died that he loved, his uncle died, all of his children died during his own lifetime, except for Fatima. So all of these to do with family, etc., which are sometimes the most difficult. In terms of the wealth and all of that, how many difficulties they went through, how much hunger they went through. They had to eat leaves of trees at one time when they were under sanctions in Mecca. The wars, everything that happened. But in another way, it was the most easy, because he's in such a state of tawakkul, he's in such a state of iman, he's in such a state in being in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that all of those hardships, compared to how they would affect us, they don't affect him. Because he's always pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though he says it's the most difficult, they have the most difficult tests, but they're in the best state at the same time. أما تسمع قوله تعالى قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشد الناس بلاء الأنبياء ثم الشهداء ثم الأمثل فالأمثل. So this is the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, the people with the most tribulation test are the prophets, and then the shuhada. Why shuhada? Because they're the next in rank. He didn't mention siddiqeen, although siddiqeen actually come above shuhada. But it's just summarizing, you know. ثم الأمثل فالأمثل. Then the people who are closest, then the people who are closest.
He after prophets he's got translated as scholars. I thought shuhada was shaheed.
I've got shuhada.
Martyrs.
Yeah.
He's
Have you got shuhada or
No,
martyrs?
ulama.
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 What do anyone else have Arabic or? Shuhada. Yeah.
Subjected to the hardest calamities in the next in status and the next in so they omit that completely.
Oh. So you got ulama.
Ulama,
You
yeah.
got shuhada. Shuhada.
And this has scholars and
It could be. It
Is,
could be a mistake, or it could be the actual manuscript. There's difference in the manuscript.
is that a say hadith? So you can just check the reference. Is that in like
that is, yes.
in one of the six?
Yeah. I think it's shuhada in the hadith, but Allah alam, we can check.
In the Tarjum, the Malay one is actually ulama.
How is it in the third? We can check inshallah.
Because the highest of ranks is the messengers, then the prophets, then the
Siddiqeen,
the righteous,
then the shuhada,
then shuhada,
then the salihun,
and then the angels.
Well, with angels it depends as well,
But man can be, exceed angels if
Yes.
and then if he becomes corrupted, then he obviously
Yeah.
the angels are higher.
but for example, some of the top angels
Yeah.
may be higher than the salihun or the shuhada as well.
But not higher than
But
the prophets.
the greatest prophets will be higher than the greatest angels, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So it's the
But
messengers.
exactly where's the rank, we don't know. I mean,
Messengers, prophets, righteous.
the message was then the Siddiqeen, which are
Siddiqeen is truthful, isn't it?
truthful. Then the Shuhada, then the Salihin, the righteous. That's very clear from the ayah of Quran. قد أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين.
What ayah is that from?
Nisa.
Surah Nisa, yeah?
What's that?
Is it Surah Nisa?
Yeah.
I can't remember these one of those. It might be Surah Nisa. قد أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا. Yeah, it's either, yeah, definitely one of those two. If you want the reference, okay.
No, I'm just checking now.
فإذا من قصد الخير وتجرد لطريق الآخرة استقبلته هذه المحن فإن لم يصبر عليها. Okay, let's finish up inshallah. We run over time. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد